So what happens is the transportation planner, they start building the trucks. Let's say, suppose if we are on the freight order side where we have deal with truckers. So what happens is they start doing the planning. So the planning is basically done in the transportation cockpit and TM system, where it builds the truck based upon the capacity of the truck plus some of the constraints which we can set up in our profiles. And then we feed all this information to the optimizer, and then optimizer massages and it does some logic building, and then it's just written back that okay, if you are sending this much of stuff, I'm gonna give you that it will be loaded into three truck kind of thing. So those things will be happen in the cockpit. So these all these informations will come up in the transportation execution functional area, where you can do the carrier selection, or you can, if you want to do a tendering, whether you want to broadcast or whether you have your dedicated lane, so you can set up your own trade lane. Or if you have some if you have some commitment with the carrier, like a carrier wants that every day, or specific carrier wants 5 truckload from this specific region, and if you have a specific agreement, then you can have I mean, we can have some functionality in SAP ETM where we can create some trade lanes and do some type of business share, and allocate to a specific trade lane, so that whenever the optimizer run to build the truck, it will give the precedence to those customer whenever we are shipping out to a specific region. So I'm going to show you, I mean, at this point of time I cannot show this information, but yeah, or maybe in our coming training session, anyways, I will showcase that how we can deal these type of things. And these are very very essential business requirement, because I'm into this transportation management uh, um, area for last 5 years, and I have seen, like, the business come up with a very very crazy type of queries. So these are one of the queries, but this is anyways a legitimate, because they wanted to build a reputation and a relationship with the carrier, so they want to go with this type of uh, deal. And then coming on to once the carrier and tendering is done, we do our charges and settlement business functional area, I would say, where we do have our specific agreements. And based on the agreements, if suppose if you are going with LTL as a means of transport, then you might need to have a specific web service, which basically we required to calculate the load freight based on the load and plus the freight cost or freight class, I would say. So, like, maybe if someone is from supply chain or from the side, they know what is freight class, and all these informations are the master data which are set up in the material master. So based on those freight class, the weights or the freight weight is being calculated through some third party application like Zarlite, which basically are very famous in US. So all the LTL freight weights are being calculated in Zarlite application. So anyways, the idea system we cannot integrate, but I do have some documents which will be very beneficial for you for future, because if you go to any SAP TM company wherever they use TM, they will definitely need LTL scenario with Zarlite as a uh, web service, which will be required to calculate the freight weight. So those are the informations. I will share it. And once the charges are being calculated, and once the truck is departed from your warehouse, you do the settlement with the carrier. So in that case, what happens is, when you do the settlement, then automatically what happens is your service PO and the service entry sheet gets generated in the ECC box. And once this document gets generated, and then you do your vendor invoice payment and all. So these are the different functional area. And if anyone has any question, just please hold your horses for for later, because let me just finish up everything. And then after, if you have any queries, please feel free to ask me. I can clear all these doubts. Moving on to TM end to end. So here is this is a very very I would say, like, maybe prior to SAP TM 9.5, we had this type of scenarios where I'm sorry, prior to S4 HANA 1809, because 1809 is an embedded solution. So we in the 1809 we don't have some of the documents which are showing up in this screen, but this document is mainly for standalone TM system. So if you look at these functional areas like order management, we do have like we do have our sales order, purchase order, deliveries, your return orders, any type of or STOs. So whenever you create this, create whenever you create the sales order in ECC, what happens is the sales order gets automatically replicated in our TM system as an order-based transportation request requirement. We call it as OTR. And similarly, whatever the if we create a delivery document in our SAP ECC box, the delivery gets replicated with DTR. This is the base document or the source document for TM system to start building the subsequent document. So once these document gets created, the freight unit building rule kicks off, and based on your business requirement, how they deal the freights, we create a freight unit. So we do have our different strategies like sales order, I mean per item, per order, or or unlimited kind of thing. So those are the different strategies which we have in our system. So those informations, based on those information, the system will create another document in TM, which is basically a freight unit. And this freight unit is very, very essential in SAP TM for planning. All right. So once the freight unit is built, then what happens is it depends on the business. Uh, I have my previous customer where they do the planning every hour, but currently in my current company, we don't have the jobs which is executing in 1 hour, but we do have very heavy lifting jobs which basically executed at night, because we had to have tons of freight units, and all the plannings will be done through a nightly job. But there is a provision where the transportation planner can access those freight unit, and if they want, they can do the optimization uh, in their system by their own. So we call it as a planning. So planning is kind of like you start building the trucks by based upon your specific selection profile parameter, which includes like your time related horizon, like what is the pickup date or what is the delivery date. Similarly, what are the geographical location, like suppose if you want to ship from uh, like from New Jersey to Midwest kind of thing. So you're gonna create a zone which basically covers all the locations which falls in the Midwest, and then you set up a new transportation lane between your New York or New Jersey plan to the Midwest. So based upon those parameters, you set up your selection profile, and when you use that selection profile, automatically all the freight unit which falls under those criteria will automatically come up in the transportation cockpit. I know it is very difficult for you guys to understand, but just to give you that how the planners use or do the planning in the system. But once the freight units show up in the transportation cockpit, then the planners start doing the optimization or the planning. So when they start doing the planning, we do have a planning profile which has several parameters, like it has around 7 or 8 different tabs, and every tab in the planning profile is very important, like what will be the transportation cost or planning cost, what will be the penalty cost, what will be the incompatibilities, what will be the whether we can uh, we can go up to 3000 miles, or we cannot exceed like 50 hours of truck duration kind of thing. So those are the information which will be feed up or will be set up in the planning profile, and that planning profile is basically are the source which basically send this information in the cockpit to the optimizer engine, which basically runs in the SAP kernel. And that SAP kernel, there is it's basically a optimizer. It's basically an algorithm. That algorithm is running in the kernel. It's you don't have any control because it is written in C language. And but the planning profile, it basically sends those information that okay, if you want to do a planning, if suppose if something is going to be the shipment is going to late by 1 day, so what planning cost, you penalty cost you're gonna apply, so that you will calculate versus if you are sending the same shipment on next day, so what will be the cheapest cost. So those information will feed to the optimizer engine, and then optimizer engine will automatically do the planning, and it will create a freight order or freight booking based upon the the mode of transport. Like if it is road, then it will be a freight order, and if it is ocean scenario or the air scenario, it will be a freight booking. So once it is done, then you do a subcontracting where you determine the carrier and do a tendering process. So tendering process, when you do, you send some ADIs 214, and you get the response back from the carrier whether they want to accept the tender and all. So those informations will be available yeah, in the TM system. You can very well control. And once the subcontracting is done, then what happens is uh, you do the settlement, because everything is already accepted. So once the settlement is done, so inside the settlement, before settlement, you do the charges, because charge calculation either you do based upon your freight agreement, whatever you have set up in your system. So that itself is a master data in TM system, where you have your own agreement with some calculation sheets and some rate tables kind of thing. So those are a little bit, it's kind of, I would say it's kind of uh, SD pricing, but it is actually not SD pricing. You can say like it's SD pricing, but it has a different architecture altogether. It's not based on the condition technique what is there in the sales and distribution or MM module. And once the settlement is done, then you do the postings to your accounts, or if you want to do the cost distribution based upon your general ledger or your GL account kind of thing. So you can do all these postings or the cost distributions in the ECC. So you send this information, the settlement document, to ECC box, and the ECC will create some documents like service entry sheet and service PO. And service entry sheet is the base where they create some vendor invoice. All right, so just give me a minute. And then moving on to the next slide, which basically, again, whatever I have discussed for last 5 minutes, that's exactly the same thing what this specific screen is showing up. So if you look at this one, so what happens is, one sec. Uh, so let's say suppose you create a sales order in ECC box. This OTR document is will be created automatically replicated in the TM system. So OTR, you can say it's just a replica of sales order. So it's basically a non-editable document in TM system. It is a source document. Based on this source document, TM goes and creates some subsequent documents. So once this OTR gets created, then we do have our own freight unit building rule, whatever, like how you want to create a freight unit. So once you create, I mean, based on this freight unit, the system will create a freight unit. And once a freight unit is built, then you do the planning. And based on the planning, you create a freight order. And once a freight order, during that freight order, you do the carrier selection, tendering, whatever the business requirement. Once everything is done, once the departure is done from your warehouse, uh, then automatically this freight order will get subsequent document, which is a freight settlement document, and this freight settlement document will send out to your uh, to ECC box again, and this box will create the service PO and the service entry sheet, and which will be a vendor invoice. There are some times like either you can execute your business process from delivery side. You don't want your sales order to send out to TM, so you can start the business process from the delivery side. When you create a delivery, automatically the DTR gets created based on your freight unit building rule. Your freight unit gets created, and then you do the planning. So it's all about the business need on what basis they want to do the planning, whether they want to do the planning during the sales order creation, or they want to do the planning during the delivery creation. So it's all about the it's all about the business decision. But the process is altogether the same. I mean, most of the process will altogether the same, because anyways, when you finish up with your planning, you come up with your freight orders, and then everything will go as it is. But prior to your planning, if suppose if you start with your sales order, then what happens is, once you create your freight order, you send the information back to ECC to create a delivery. So you send the message back to ECC to create a delivery. So this freight order will send the message to ECC to create a delivery, and then delivery gets created, and delivery will be